it again. It is DW Darkwing Dad. Today I'm going to be giving you the Moon Knight tutorial. This is something I've been wanting to do for a little bit. I've just been busy. I have the attention span of an adolescent dog. Squirrel! So we're going to be doing two different models of the Moon Knight helmet, both the hooded magnetic helmet and the more sleek looking helmet. Two different masks, and we're doing two different types of processes in a sense that you probably haven't seen before. So with both of these helmets, what I did was I tried to mimic the look of fabric, and we'll obviously cover everything in the tutorial, but each helmet is done in a different aspect. I am using my Bondo spray putty technique, but there are other methods that you can use to replicate this. We're using both the do3d files, very awesome files, probably one of the most accurate files that you will see. So what we're gonna do now is just quickly talk about printing, some of the way the pieces were oriented on the build plate, some cutting and slicing options, and then how everything looked after it was printed. So let's go. First file I'm going to talk about is the helmet with the magnetic hood piece, as you can see here on top of the crown. Printing this is actually quite simple. You can just completely tip this upside down and print it just like that. All of the junk and I guess all of the wear and tear is all going to be right here, which in essence is going to be covered by the hood. So you don't really need to focus on having this perfect per se. So like I said, printing this one, very easy. Just print it upside down, whatever layer height, whatever you want to do. You can watch some of my other videos and some of the settings I have and the tips and tricks for printing and getting a nice clean quality print. The hood I personally split up using Windows 3D Builder. The hood doesn't really have a ton of density to it. So my biggest concern was if I printed this upside down is once it gets to the top, this may start to flex. It could just create a lot of cleanup. You really want this to be nice and smooth, nice and clean. This is one of the main focal points of the hood. So I opted not to flip this upside down because I didn't want it to affect any of the just symmetry within the hood. I have to worry about this getting all chopped up and having to clean all that up. Again, these are very eccentric, very clean lines that we want to keep. So I personally found it's easier just to slice it up, PLA weld all of this together, and then just have one seam versus a bunch of other cleanup. Now the side fins for the hood and the back piece of the hood, those were very easy. They didn't really need any supports. They just kind of went on the build plate just facing up. Same thing here. With the hood though, you do need a decent amount of supports here because obviously trying to print on that sharp little spike there is a no-no. It's gonna fail. So we did have to do about a 60-degree overhang just to support the whole front of the hood here. There was a decent amount of supports on the inside, as you can see here. With the proper settings and everything, they should just pop right off. And really what it leaves you with is a super clean, super nice top of the hood that really isn't gonna need a ton of post-processing, which is really what I was going after. So that was pretty much my direction with the hooded version. There was still a little bit of post-processing to do, but I think significantly less because the printer did a majority of the work. As far as the hoodless version goes, that was just very easy. Because we were gonna be showing off the top part of this dome potentially, I printed and oriented on the build plate basically just like this. It does have a magnetic back, so that was just basically just printed like this. I did block out the centerpiece. It printed no problem. You can kind of see here that there was no issues with the printing. There were some minor overhangs on the nose and the eyes where I did want to support. Just have it flat on the build plate, going straight up. But once the helmets were all printed and done, it was time to start post-processing. So let's get into it. All right, so here's a look at the helmet fresh off of the printer, printed at a 0.32 layer height for speed purposes, around 12% infill. Got that magnetic back already installed. do3d has some great options there for those prefab magnet holders. So you can see we got some PLA lines here. We're gonna have to knock them down, but we don't wanna knock down all of them because they're actually gonna help give that fabric wrap looked effect. So we have some heavy overhang areas here that need a little bit more work, and I'm actually going to show you guys a cool little trick that I haven't showed you before to help knock those down a little bit faster so you don't have to really rely on fillers or putties or things like that quite as much to get those areas smoothed out. But decent print. We do have some post-processing to do, so let's get to it. All right, quick tip here on post-processing your prints. When you have those certain areas as overhangs where the print ends and the layer lines kind of conjoin together and they're almost like steps. They're a really big pain in the butt to sand down. You gotta get filler and putty and all that. Just do like a good solid sand by hand, maybe with 80 grit, and then go over it with a soldering iron. You don't wanna put a lot of pressure. You just kind of wanna drag it across, and you can see what it'll do. It'll smooth that stepping of the layer lines out and just make it a lot easier to sand. So it's a very, I guess you'd say, delicate process, but in the end, you know, it really does help knock down those areas a lot faster. There's a few areas where we're going to have to do it here on the helmet, but a big tip there, it definitely helps smooth those things out a lot faster. Once that's complete, we're ready just to get into a nice heavy scuff sand. Believe it or not, with this process on the non-hooded model, this is the only sanding that I'm really going to do on this helmet. So I pretty much went over it with 80 and 120 just to kind of knock down those PLA lines a little bit. Once it was all set, it was Bondo spray putty time. All right, so now that we have the helmet sprayed with the Bondo putty, what I want to do now is a new technique that I came across that mimics the look of fabric. It fits Moon Knight almost perfect because we know that both his Mr. Knight and his Moon Knight, they're wrapped in fabric. Adds a little bit of difference to the piece, and it also helps kind of hide the PLA lines so we don't have to do quite as much sanding as before. But what you want to do for this technique is basically you want to take a microfiber towel, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to take some acetone, we're going to put it on the towel, and we're going to blot the mask. And what that'll do is the acetone, in a sense, it'll kind of break down and start to eat away at the putty, but at the same time, that pattern that is on the microfiber towel will, in a sense, transfer over onto the mask, giving it that fabric-y kind of look. Now you want to make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. You want to make sure you have a respirator on. You want to make sure you have proper gloves on because we are dealing with acetone. It's not something that's going to be aerated, but still, you don't want that stuff getting into your skin. You don't want it inches from your face and breathing that stuff in. You can even wear safety goggles if need to. It's always better to have more PPE than less. Once the process is complete, the helmet should look something like this, and we can move on to applying filler primer. Now, I'm using Bondo filler primer here. I think you guys all know I'm pretty partial to this. Also, Duplicolor is another great filler primer, but you want to go through and put some adequate coats on, making sure you're covering that pre-existing glazing putty. After that, you can do an optional method where I like to spray it and then dab the towel on right away. It will just enhance that fabric look. You can even go as far as after your filler primer is dry, taking some acetone on a towel and repeating the same process that we did with the glazing putty. But you can see here that it's doing a great job of filling in those PLA lines. Keep in mind, guys, we've done no sanding on this other than the initial scuff sand. If there's some rough spots on there, you can do like a high grit sand, maybe 800 or 1000, or even take some acetone and blot those areas. Around the eyes, you're definitely going to want to do a little bit of sanding because the filler primer kind of builds up and gets a little dusty and overspray. But after that's all done, you can go ahead and get into your paint. So here I'm just using a matte glacier gray, and you can see once again I'm painting it and I'm dabbing it with the towel. This will just enhance that fabric look. It really looks well. I know it might seem a little bit monotonous, like, hey, you keep dabbing this thing with the towel, but it's a lot faster than having to go through and sand everything over and over and over again. And keep in mind, we had some, pretty deep PLA lines in here, but I think this whole process really filled them into a good degree, and it really makes it look more like fabric, and it makes it look like the helmet is wrapped. They don't really look like too obvious, PLA lines. Now, switching over to the hooded version, I did do some sanding on this. So instead of doing the blotting with the glazing putty, I actually went through and sanded it with 400 and 600. So it did knock down a lot more of those lines. I still wanted them to be a little bit faint, but not quite as heavy as the non-hooded version. So here, just giving you a look at the back piece here. Again, the front piece, just did sanding on the glazing putty and then did the blotting when it came to the filler primer and the paint. So you can see that the PLA lines just aren't as distinguished here. They are covered up a little bit more. It is a little bit smoother. I still think it gives for a really cool effect, especially around those detailed areas. Really looks great. Here you can see it now weathered and painted and everything. It really looks cool. This is the first time I did this on a 3D print, and it definitely wowed me a little bit. It just makes it look so realistic, so cool. Of course, you can do more sanding if you want in conjunction with the blotting of the glazing putty. Overall, it looked awesome. Now, my paint method. I have gone over this before. Basically, all I do is I just take a small piece of a microfiber towel and some oil-based paint, and I just kind of smear it all over the helmet. I make sure I get in all the cracks and all the crevices because that's where we want that grunge to look up. That's going to give it the depth and the contrast that we want. I then take some mineral spirits because those help break down oil-based paints, and I'm basically just kind of rubbing it in and diluting and diminishing the paint to a certain degree. What's great with this is if you do too much or you don't do enough, you can always go back and add paint and do more. Same painting scheme was used here on the hooded version. Obviously a little bit more work because it's so big, but really came out awesome, giving awesome results. Magnetic back here, you can see I have all the magnets installed here. They have the prefabbed magnet holes on the do3d file, so that's nice. LED eyes, also a nice touch here. You can also see that I swapped out the larger AAA battery pack for the smaller one. Cool effect though, these are white LEDs. For whatever reason, they look like they're blue. I'm sure all you Moon Knight cosplayers know the struggle, but just some hot glue to mount the LEDs in place and for some nice wire management. Now, the top crown piece, if you print it upside down, it is going to print faster, less supports, but the supports do kind of chew up and kind of mess up that whole little crown piece. So I had to go through with a soldering iron and really clean all this up. You can see I added a inner magnet on the inside, that middle piece there, just for some extra support because I wasn't sure if those magnets were really going to support the weight of that whole helmet. So just keep in mind, you know, you are going to have to do some work with a soldering iron. On this, the hood was printed right side up, not upside down, and I still had to go through, take the soldering iron and clean all this stuff up. There's really no way around it. It is going to get messed up a little bit from the supports. But overall, I mean, the hood came out awesome. Right here was all PLA welded. Obviously, I weathered that. More prep was taken in this hood, as mentioned earlier, because it was, you know, so many separate pieces. But, you know, you follow those PLA welding tutorials that I have, you won't even notice the seam. Overall, this hood came out awesome. Here, just showing you how this magnet piece just kind of clicks in place. It supports the weight. It's actually really good. I did wear this piece. It was a little bit bigger on my head, but the hood just basically locks in place, and you can see here from the results, just really awesome. Again, more sanding was done, but you could still see some of those faint PLA lines here and there, and that's kind of the effect that I wanted to go with. I think it just came out awesome. I think it's a really cool effect and just a cool way to do that, and it does cut down on sanding a little bit, doing that towel blotting, those very, very faint PLA lines that sometimes you start chasing in the build. If you do that blotting and it fits the helmet, you know, you want something with a little bit texture, something a little bit different. Overall, it really comes out great. And just one last quick look at the non-hooded version here. Again, just a really cool effect. I really think it made it look a lot like fabric, and again, not as much sanding, which is always awesome. LED eyes, we follow the same suit here. They look great, and let's get into some final shots and see how it looks. All this emptiness inside, sometimes I just wanna die. Is it all inside my head? I think I'm paranoid. All right, everyone, well, that's it. That is a wrap on the Moon Knight helmets. Different way of kind of smoothing and finishing your 3D prints if you want to mimic that fabric look. You know, obviously on the hooded version, we did a little bit more sanding. That was really essential because that hood, you really wanted that to be as smooth as possible. So still a little texture there, still trying to mimic that fabric, but a little bit more prep work into there. Obviously on the non-hooded version, I thought letting a little bit of those PLA lines kind of bleed through and mimicking the fabric with the towel, I think it turned out absolutely awesome. So really just different strokes for different folks. I think it's a pretty cool idea. The biggest thing is really minimal amounts of sanding were done specifically on this helmet. Obviously I did a little bit more on the hooded version, but just the glazing putty, a little bit of acetone, that blotting, that dabbing. Really cool look, you know, if you're doing any sort of cosplay like a mummy or Moon Knight or something else that has fabric, I think it's a pretty cool option, and I think some great tips for all my Moon Knight cosplayers. Obviously, a lot of things covered in this video, so if you guys have any questions on anything, don't hesitate to either shoot me an email or drop me a comment in the video. Everything that I did use in the video, links will be in the description. Snag them and then drop me some love and let me know what you think and how you made out. All my subscribers and viewers, thank you so much. I appreciate all the support, all your comments, all your likes, all your hearts, all that stuff that you do on the videos. It is much appreciated. If you are not subscribed to the channel and you enjoy all things 3D printing, cosplay, Funko Pops, Marvels, all the things we're doing on here, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Got a lot more fun content on the way, more helpful tutorials, more giveaways, including that Thor hammer, which I will have that video up hopefully within the next week or two. That's pretty much a wrap on this video, guys. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you liked the video. Any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, drop me some comments in the comment section. Enjoy these last few shots of Moon Knight, and until next time, DW out. Later.